Welcome to the Dreaming Wild, where we invite the unseen to dwell in us and guide us deeper. I'm Dani West, somatic dreamworker and your host. In a world drunk on urgency and careening into chaos, we gather to ritualize slowness, rewild our psyche, incubate the imaginal, and root into the animate forces that shape our lives. By doing so, we make more room for magic to land in our bones and in our world. Turns out we could use a little magic these days. If you're loving the show, come join our patron community over at thedreamingwild.com. Thank you so much for sharing, subscribing, and boosting our reach. The Dreaming Wild wouldn't exist without the direct support of this amazing community. And now onto our episode. Ancestral tasks and building resilience. Today's guest is Amber B. Pagaling, an Indigenous multidisciplinary artist from Southern California. Her work as a poet is embedded with undertones of ancestral care and future tense responsibility. In 2020, she joined the Buckminster Fuller cohort in the Design Science Studio to explore the cinematic links between poetry and sustainability to further her project, The Regenerative Footprint. Grounded in feminine wisdom and compassion, she articulates and channels a revolutionary impulse to gather courage in brutal times and empathy upon the collective sojourn home to our belonging. This episode is all about cultivating creativity as a path to interconnectedness and social justice movements. We go deep into real talk, community building, televised genocide, and how to build resilience in the polycrisis. And stick around for some inspired tales at the end. Her dream about the call, her synchronicity with whales, and a downtown encounter with a stranger that pretty much proves that magic is real and kindness matters.
Unstitched from the body of time, unmoored into feral chasm, sacred terrains of knowing have begun to pollinate the baffled womb, whose authorship foments new fugues for ancestral tasks. And it asks, who will dance upon your bones in the high grass? How will you inherit the smattering opal breath of infancy in the silt of forests yet to be born? In the crack of a honeyed dawn, what egrets will sojourn past the mirrored plains of waters that once bore you? We are the Forcesters, weaving a shift in the boundless web of gossamer jewels whose tumbling molts into the shimmer between what was and becoming, singing the sunlight into our being like a note in a bottle in the sea that would say, we were here. In the vast occupation of an ever-renewing now, do not listen to the thieves of hope. Hope is a word derived from Delta, where estuaries in their tendrils clasp towards the sea in completion, and in completion, be ever fretted into a tapestry of the great void. Be ever humbled and curious as a tool for its auspicious lines of song, rippling into the wild folds of arms, lifting, luminous and open. Let your doubts wilt. Feed into the sounds of busted clocks, and in their bursting, feel that whole languid notion writhing in the stuttering opus, billowing in the tumult, where echoed hours connects gently in sinews, finds drops in the humming, draws flint in its sparking. Reach, weave, listen. The blanket of an old night is lifting, and new volumes of a thundering grace as fingerprints for labyrinths that lead us towards etudes of gratitudes from the future ones. It is a bridge, you see, seeking the nails in your pockets for its rising, seeking the deliciousness of your own tomb as a space for the Forcesters to dance in wild abandon, in that sacred yes of becoming.
We hear so much about our ancestors, and very rarely do we hear a mention of our Forcesters. Can you speak a bit to this piece is definitely reaching through time in all directions. Can you speak a bit to your weaving
Yeah.
of the
Mm-hmm.
Forcesters?
We currently living are the Forcesters in relationship to the ancestors. And then the ones who've yet to be born, when they are born, they will know themselves as the Forcesters, and we being the ancestors. So it's a lineage, and I feel like it relates to seeing the world through a lens of compassion. That to be about it, it's an inheritance of the love of the choices of those that came before us, inheriting their choices and the love that they had for us, and then extending it forward to those that have yet to come. That it's like a field that is being woven into being, into expression. So, but yeah, I love that poem, and I haven't really promoted it, but I more so send the piece to people that excite me or inspire me. It's sort of like a beacon of light, sort of saying, like glinting in the moment of the day, saying, I see you, and I see that we are in similar kind resonance, like in terms of our presence here in these times that we find ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely a beacon. Hearing the piece, I feel like it fills me with like a gritty kind of hope, not a lofty sort of fantasy reach, but into a visceral, intimate invitation into my own life. And I feel like it is probably, I mean, it speaks to the weary place in me. I imagine it would also speak to the weary ones, the ones who aren't maybe taking up a creative project or feeling necessarily aligned on their path, but a deep call back into life from wherever they are, however they stand or however they're crumbling. This one line strikes me in particular. The blanket of a long night is lifting. Is that
Yeah.
how it goes?
Yeah, the blanket of an old night is lifting.
Yeah.
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 Just that we're coming out of an age of brutality.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's, yeah, like a kind of dark ages type of thing.
Absolutely. And it mothers me to hear that, you know. It's a gritty kind of hope. There's a promise in that it fortifies me and calls me forward to engage again, to turn back
Thank you.
toward. Yeah.
Thank you. I, for, so like hope for me, I feel like I'm always questioning hope. Like, like it's dynamic, at least like because there's this line in the Tao where it says, hope and fear are phantoms that are derived from thinking of the self. Whether you go up the ladder or down it, your position is shaky. I think that's the line, something like that. And so, like, yeah, it makes me question it. So that line of hope is a word derived from delta. So at the same time, I'm saying trust and hope. It's more so like a line of saying have faith in the arc of the universe.
Yeah.
Thinking about the arc of things, the arc of the universe, as if like at the inception of this whole thing of consciousness and beingness, and it was as to say, sure, we're going to go into separation consciousness, but there's going to be it will always work out. Yes, things may look perilous, but things will always work out in the end. As if that was like the deal or something that was struck. In the line where I say that where estuaries and their tendrils clasp towards the sea in completion and incompletion. So the word hope apparently is derived from delta. Oh. And yeah, so like where the river meets the sea, where it like comes to a greater opening. Yeah. I think it's the diminishing of the perception of your smallness. It's the perception of your connection to everything that is. I feel a sense of the diminishing of like fear, or the diminishing of mistruth, kind of disintegrating a little bit from my thought forms and perceptions, when I come to that space of that opening up and seeing, like, it's, first of all, it's out of my control.
Yeah.
It's not like something for me to control anyways.
Yeah.
And then second of all, there's no point where, I mean, I am always going to be connected to the sacred.
Yeah. But that delta moment is like the homecoming. I mean, the long journey through the watershed and the separation and the filtration, and then finally coming back into that union. So if hope is this returning to the larger arc of life and the broader movement of our human story, and the relinquishing of our smallness, what do you think the slippery part of hope is then? Like, what would be the shadowy bit? What would be the phantom? What would be the part to watch for?
The falseness of hope, that it is a fantasy to get lost in, and to stop engaging with the work and stop engaging with people, boots on the ground, doing what you can, showing up to the protest, like just being like, no, I just trust it's all going to work out, and just no. Like, you still have to show up. I think that's the shadow side of hope, is the fantasy part, where you're removing yourself from being engaged. Yeah, or coming from like a point of privilege and just saying, oh, this doesn't affect me because I have hope, I trust that it's all going to work out in the end. It's like, oh.
Hope is not a hall pass.
yes, hope is not a hall pass.
Yeah,
that's how I feel about it. But, and again, I have to put an asterisk, a little footnote with everything that I'm saying. This is just my opinion, and this is our conversation. So I feel like anytime, at least for me, I've noticed, like, anytime someone comes up saying like, oh, I have the answer, or I have like the solution, or I have I'm an expert or something like that, I feel like the universe just goes, to like really like bring them back down to earth.
Absolutely. And it is interesting, the deeper we go into exploring our motivations or finding a balanced approach in our lives, the more self-reflection, inner work we're doing. Personally, I feel that the more paradox is revealed. Like, if we're exploring this theme of hope, for example, hope is not a hall pass. We need to bring that optimism into like tangible action and apply it, and use that hope as fuel for the way we move through our lives, the way we move through our communities, the decisions that we're making, the values that we're bringing forward. And paradoxically, I feel there's also truth to the power of the surrender too, right? Like you're saying, to that broader arc of life, and recognizing so much of this is in my hands and so much of it is out of my hands. And walking with the tension of those opposites, like being able to hold paradox, to be able to stake a claim in something with conviction and say, this is something I found and this is something I would speak to, while also holding the other part that says, and there's a lot of complexity and nuance here. I feel like there's a fruitfulness in that.
Yeah. And it's all like through our tiny little like worlds, our tiny little like lives, and our it's sort of like plucking a little tiny leaf out of a forest and saying, this is the forest.
Right. Yeah. Perfect illustration.
It's kind of funny. This is the forest. People are like, okay.
And it is, and it also isn't.
Yeah. Holon. It's holonic. Arthur Koestler has this cool word called holon. It's like HOLON. And it means that which is simultaneously a part and a whole. And I feel like when I think about the paradox of hope, and it cannot be like a false hope in the sense of like a hall pass to sort of not be responding to your abilities to show up in the time that you are, and doing what you can, doing this whole thing is like we're sort of like a fractal in a way. That we're this tiny, like there's as far as I can see, right? As far as I can see and sense, and like there's like particles, and then minerals and plants and animals, and then us. But that's like a fractal of like going all the way up. It keeps going, and there's no point at which there's a separation between my point of perception. All there is my point of perception, right? But if you think of like, we're sort of like horses in Central Park, right? If we think that life, like when you say life is like our lives, like, yes, we do have lives, and yes, we are going in this like area, but like, what's beyond the blinders?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that fractal of all different forms of life, and that fractal of life as it keeps going up, that there's not a sense of disconnection to it. I mean, you have to be able to be somewhat disconnected to it in a way, just to like be able to keep going, to keep like having your life and doing your things and doing your dishes, right? You can't be in constant awe of your connection to the universe to do your dishes. But at the same time, it's like, it's still there. And that's the thing I really like about having a creative practice, whether it's poetry or painting or music or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's that time to drop in and be fully aware of that connectivity. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not doing my dishes right now. I'm not driving right now. I am fully dropping in. And I feel like that's that showing up with that little leaf in the forest and saying, this is the forest. Like this song or this poem or this whatever it is the way that eternity is showing up as this fingerprint / like snowflake falling once. Like it will never repeat itself again. That's not to say that we're special. It's to say that we're essential. We're like that like tiny little thread in a tapestry. Like there I am, right there. I'm like right there. Mm-hmm. And see you. You're right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's interesting that you would especially highlight the dishes, because that's my personal church. It's something about the water and the change of the dishes and the way I stack things and the dance of it has become a bit of my like moving meditation. But I'm interested if you could tease apart the distinction, like between having a focus container that is specifically for creativity versus the creativity of life. I mean, every act that we're engaged in is creative and intuitive to some degree if we're showing up and paying attention. But as an artist, can you speak to the specific spark that comes online for you, through you, around you, when you open up that kind of space that does feel different? It does feel distinct.
Yeah. Well, I like the idea of what you were just saying, though, that as an artist, you can apply your creativity and your presence to different, all sorts of things, even the dishes. And I love that you have a practice in the dishes.
Yeah,
and
thanks.
Yeah, that's really cool. I used to pretend that a dish was a baby.
Aw.
So there would be like this feeling of imbued presence and care of each single like moment. And it wasn't about the dish. It was about the feeling in my chest when I was like cleaning the dish.
Yeah.
Like it was like polishing something, but not the dish. It was me like inside kind of thing.
I love that.
But going back to your question, when I shouldn't say engaging, when I am getting, how do I say this? Like, I think of it like holding a strand of my hair. It's like holding a little strand of my hair. And that's all I gotta be. I just gotta be this little strand. I just gotta get out of the way and just focus on all the space around, like the whole room, and let something come through. But you're like, it's a smallness that isn't it's not a nothingness. It's a smallness that creates space for presence of something of the divine to come through, right? Through the sacred, through your connection to joy. Your creative practice is that potent connection to joy, at least for me. It's letting go of the thought of the thing and just allowing it to like come through whatever it is, whether it's a painting or a poem or music or whatever. You're like, you're this tiny little fiber, like you're allowing something bigger to happen. It's a surrendering act. I think John Frusciante talked about that a little bit, actually. He was like, there are artists that think that there's what did he say? He was like, there's a bad nothing and there's a good nothing. That like artists think that they're a good nothing or a bad nothing. And that if you're a bad nothing, you think that your gift is yours and that you are the ... enter the slot. You're the genius, or you're the whatever the record company has told you are, for example. That's a bad nothing. So you're like, yes, I am great. And, like you think that you're this great and that's where falls from grace happen. Like that's where all sorts of things happen in terms of getting deep into addiction or sex or whatever it is, drugs, is thinking, because the ego is
needs
like running the show.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's horribly running the show. And then the good nothing is recognizing your that you're just there to be present to whatever's coming through.
Yeah.
All you're there is to just be like a little cup.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing you describe is in the focus, like really narrowing the focus on one particular medium and allowing the entire universe to like condense into that one particular thread. It's like the threading of a needle in a way, and then it opens up to the everythingness, the flow, the creative inspiration that can come through, and essentially your connection to that. I wonder if you could speak a little bit to the difference in that way for you personally, what it means to be in the experience of that, as opposed to focusing on the production or product of a thing.
It feels a lot like prayer. That's why I say the sacred. And I don't say this, I'm not speaking for other artists, I'm just saying for me, it feels a lot like prayer. It feels like sometimes when I'm singing and I feel something coming through, it's just so potent, and like I'm feeling a release of the grief, which is why for years I couldn't sing in public, because like I would just start crying because of the thing that I was coming through was an audible expression of the grief, or it was an audible expression of something that really was moving me. But I didn't feel a sense of like, oh, this is me. I was more like a witnessing of the thing that was happening. There's in-breath and out-breath in terms of inspiration and expression, that when you are inspired to create something, it's like it's like a in-breath type of thing. And it builds up this energy, and you have this will developing and cultivating. It starts to spin inside you. And like it takes on its own gravitational something inside you. And you have to do the thing, whether it's the words that you don't know what they are, they're just behind the surface, or the sounds or the paintings or whatever. It is coming through, but there's like a buildup. You don't know what it's going to be. And there's like a surrendering for sure. And then it comes through. But I think that I say in breath, out breath, because like when a thing comes through and you're perceiving it, then when it's done or it's like come out, then you're discerning. And the discerning is a different state of being. Like, and this is why I believe like there needs to be like a healthy relationship to the inner critic, because the inner critic can just like squelch everything from being able to even come out in the first place.
Yeah.
Because it's like an out breath function. Its purpose is to be a sculpting tool. Its purpose is to bring its cynicism, right? And somehow transform it into like discernment. It's there to be a carving tool, to use its doubt and satisfy that doubt, right? With creating choices that are in resonance with what it is that you wanted to articulate and say. So it has a function. Yeah. We just think it doesn't have a function, or we're like, no, I don't hear anything, la 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 la. If you were to like listen to it truly, like, okay, what do you have to say? How can this be constructive? There's a relationship of like constructive criticism that can happen within yourself.
Yeah. Ego can run the show, inner critic can run the show. They need to be like reassigned to helpful roles, given an outlet, like you're saying, redirected. This image of the in-breath, out-breath is really beautiful. So the taking in the inspiration, feeling the impetus, and then the creative expression being the out-breath. Can you help me unpack a little bit more how the inner critic is part of that out-breath? Is like the expression comes and then the critic comes online. How would you recommend we ride that wave of the breath in a healthy way through that expression? I'm not sure if I'm totally following.
Yeah. No, you're fine. And I don't want to be too literal, because sometimes you just have to like sit down and not have any inspiration or any, and just like do the work. Like, okay, And then by like an hour in, you're like, oh shit, okay.
This is happening.
You just have to be like doing the work. Yeah, sometimes you just need to be like sitting down, doing your thing and like waiting for it to kick in. And maybe it doesn't kick in, so it's fine. I just don't want to fetishize inspiration. Because sometimes that's just not there. Sometimes you're just like doing the thing. If you're, hey, I'm here to see if something's going to show up and happen. But in terms of I'd say most art, from what I can gather, is the desire to express or share a perception, an idea, a feeling, and to have it come into the world, have it come into expression, that it comes from communication. But that process of which it shows up is usually from inspiration, where you are inspired either from the beginning or in that process. And it comes into creation. Once it's out, then you can say, okay, what do I think? I like this. I like this. I like this. Not like, I don't really like that. I don't really like that. You know, I had done this piece with Rob Barnett, where basically I had chosen these images that were royalty free. And sometimes the words came first, or the ideas came first, and sometimes the images came first. Or I would like be working on a line, and then some image would pop in my mind. I'd be like, oh, what if I wonder if I could find like an elderly person's hands doing something. It'll just like be a glimpse of something like that. And I'll go look for it and I'll find something better. Or I won't find it and I'll find something totally tangential and it will strike a line that I didn't even think about. Like it's just like a not hide and seek, like a finding, like a treasure hunt kind of process. You know, and that's where discernment and inspiration kind of show up and co-weave together in the same, you know, it can be a tool to help you make choices and decisions that are resonant, but it needs to be seen as like a secretary. It's not the boss. Like you're not even the boss. You're not even the boss. Like your connection to the divine, to the sacred, I shouldn't say the sense of that feeling place of being on fire, that feeling place of being in joyfulness, or just something that is not nameable. Like some people might think of the word joy and it's just a word. It doesn't mean anything. Potency might be like a sense of potency, like a keenness where you feel alive, like aliveness, that electricity that is unnameable. Connecting in with that, where you're like, how did that happen? Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. And then there's not a sense of like, that's me. It's a sense of like, how did that, I don't even know how that's cool. Yeah. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think that wonder can open the space even wider for the happenings to keep happening. Like you're saying, and the project can inform itself. The practice can come to life in a way where we're hosting, we're stewarding, but we're also witnessing and along for the ride.
I graduated with an art degree. After about a year or two, really stepped back from that because I realized I had been living a bit of like carrot and stick mentality. Like if you go to school, doing something like this carrot and the stick, like that's your happiness, that you graduate and you do the thing that you're trained in and then you like doing and then you're happy. It just didn't click for me. I was there, I was like eating my carrot, so to speak. And I realized that it was only going to be about me getting my piece of the pie and charging more per inch, per painting or whatever. And I was like, wow, I don't know that I think I've been working towards something that I don't even believe in anymore. And there was just an immense kind of grief for seeing so much that was happening in the world that was so unjust to me. And that here I was just going to be getting my piece of pie, like smoozing with patrons. And that was was the most depressing thing I could think of. So I took a really big step back and I worked odd jobs ever since. I've just been working odd jobs and doing research on a project that eventually became the Regenerative Footprint, which is an Indigenous lens for the stewardship of economies, ecologies, and societies. I really, really resonate with the word Symbiocene also. Symbiocene. So like, I don't know if you've heard of the word Anthropocene.
I have.
Anthropocene, it's this proposed age of the impact, usually negative, that human beings have as an epoch or an era. And this author, Glenn A. Albrecht, had said that as soon as he heard it, something like visceral, just rebutted within himself, rebuking of like, I don't know. And so what he proposes, we swiftly exit the Anthropocene and enter into the Symbiocene, which is realizing, getting this feedback, okay, this is not working. We are
Right.
outgrowing the planetary boundaries of our nests,
Yes.
of our nest,
Yes.
that we can no longer do this to each other, to the planet, that we're coming to maturation as a collective, as a species, and that these are the negative feedbacks we're getting, that this is not working.
Yeah.
And so the Symbiocene was something he proposed as the era in which we become symbiotically in service to our coming into a mutual symbiotic relationship with the planet, recognizing that we and the planet are one and the same, enacting cradle to cradle processes, I would imagine. But anyway, so my thought was like, how do I use my creativity in a way that like is responding to the times that I find myself in?
Yeah.
And to me, I am so excited about like getting at a community scale, getting into things like bioremediation, getting into things like stewarding ideas like regenerative patterns, things that are in service to the biosphere and bioregions, happening at small, manageable scales. I really believe in like pockets of coherency. I think that like thing we have with like cultural novelty might be like a sound bath or something like that didn't exist, with a communal context, that at least that I've been going to in a communal context, that maybe that didn't exist until like in our recent lifetimes, within, I guess I should say within a Western non-religious context. I'll say it that way. As something that was accessible to a community to experience without denomination. That's a form of cultural novelty. And I really feel that like there's something to be said. There's something to be said about like bringing in that momentum of cultural novelty and pairing it with systemic mutual care with each other, with figuring out how can we embody the thing that we want to be about, how can we hold each other accountable, how do we have communal processes of mediation, how do we also look at bioremediation, like how can we become responsible for our trash or recycling, our the way that products are produced, how can we make sure there's sufficiency within a community. Anyways, I just really think that there's a parallel to be had between creativity as a driver and as an engine that creates heat and culture and interest and momentum, and then like a flywheel, hooking up that momentum with the things that need to happen in terms of response. How do we collectively tackle and respond to making sure people are housed, making sure people have enough food, making sure the people who don't have care, elder care, for example, have the care that they need. How do we figure this out, at small, manageable scales?
Yeah, there are so many questions that are yearning to be addressed, so many areas of need. And I feel like that sense of urgency is like a pressure cooker, because there is so much suffering and such immediacy in the yearning for so many. Inequity, direct oppression, marginalization. I mean, there's a lot of questions that are asking for attention. And I also agree that our creative inspiration is the circuitry to sync up to these quandaries, radical reimagining and opening to that creative guidance and insight that can come from that, the practice of opening ourselves. And I also feel, again, that this can be a place, even if we're attempting to approach it, as you're saying, in small, manageable scales, this can be a place that can be really daunting and really overwhelming. And in order to think this way, we need to be resourced. We're going to be swimming upstream against whatever kind of um, budget issues or laws in place, systemic issues that are really rigid, not necessarily fixed, but rigid. There's not a ton of flexibility to like make these things pliable. And so it becomes really slow work, really patient work. And I think the contrast of this urgency and the need alongside the slow motion alchemy of it all can feel like crazy making sometimes. Like
Yeah.
to live in the patience of that, to keep that devotional path alive. How do you, I mean, do you bump up against walls of defeat and resignation? Do you hit
Oh,
walls
yeah.
of rage and shutdown? Do you see that happening with
Mhm.
the people around you? How do you navigate that edge when it, if and when it hits?
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. I wouldn't be human if it didn't hit, or I'd be deluding myself if it didn't hit.
Yeah.
I I definitely disassociate sometimes. I
Mm-hmm.
definitely just like, no, I can't deal with this right now. Um, or I'm in deep grief.
Yeah.
But I think prayer has helped me the most, though, like, and surrendering, like, just constantly coming back to Creator and saying, like, whatever needs to happen, what is my role, relinquishing or letting go of any idea that I think that I have about what I need to do, and just like let go of that and just show up in whatever capacity that I'm enthusiastic or inspired about. There's a specificness, I will say there is a specificness to that prayer about like healing our healing our relationship, healing my relationship as an individual, and participating potently with the collective in as much as healthy and as possible, um, in terms of healing our relationship to the planet, Hutash, Shup, or and to Creator, like that sacred contract we have between Creator and the planet, and healing, being present to that, like what needs to happen to for that to be something that I can participate in my life, within my lifetime, with my hands, with my mind, with my feet, with my heart, with my creativity, with my vision, with my inspiration. Like these are the tools that I have that I was born with, and it's enough.
Mm.
And catching that enoughness,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and she's like, how do I, what is it that, does somebody just need a song? Do they need a poem? Do they need whatever
Mm-hmm.
to keep that, um, to keep that sense of connection alive? Yeah, no, I definitely lose it. I get angry, or I get enraged, and it is humbling for me to recognize and come to the realization, if I was at the opposite side of the person that I would like to blame, right? If I was sitting in the boardroom of a oil conglomerate, let's say,
Okay.
okay, okay, like actively participating, it goes back to the, I think the thing I was telling you before in our random conversations that we've had about like thinking about a weave,
Mm.
thinking about like a tapestry, like humanity, like a tapestry. Like there are some people who are going to be different threads,
Yeah.
and there are some people who are going to go in the opposite direction.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about thinking like, oh, this person is bad or evil or whatever. Like they're showing up in the essence of what I perceive as destruction.
Mm-hmm.
But if it all works out in the end, all I need to be concerned with is the way that my single thread is weaving of my lifetime, of my words, of my actions, of my deeds, of my destiny. In what direction am I weaving?
Mm-hmm.
If they're providing the tension with which for me to spring around and go towards the opposite direction, then how is that like, it's the paradox thing again.
It is.
Like, yeah.
It is the polarity and the perpendicular reach, toward very different value systems. Definitely a fascinating theme. I'm also really intrigued by this piece about enoughness and the sustainability of our own giving. I mean, it's an interesting thing. There are so many checkpoints here, right? Like the compulsion to save and the
Yeah. Oh God.
the notion of fixing, like all of these
Mhm.
shadowy elements, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
even even if we're checking ourselves there and cleaning house and really diligent about the way and the tone in which we're showing up, because there's so much work to do and so many people are struggling with just basic survival, it's like there's not a lot of emotional and energetic resource going to the decolonization work or radical reimagining work. And so it's thin, it's sparse, and that means that whomever is awake and on shift doing that good work is probably prone to burnout. And I wonder, I love what you're saying here about maybe it's a song, maybe it's keeping that inspiration alive, whatever it is that feels like it is your role. for that moment,
Mhm.
and settling into that and owning that and feeling the enoughness of it, I think is such an important reminder. But I'm also curious, what what do you do personally to do you have any kind of practice or any kind of go-tos when you're feeling worn and weary? Like, what do you reach for the human creature to fill yourself back up or keep yourself from burnout?
Uh, I don't know that I think about it as much as like if like I don't know that I'm aware sometimes when my burnout is happening.
Yeah.
I'll just feel exhausted, but I'll just be spinning my wheels, keeping trying to do the thing until I just can't anymore.
Sure.
But I want to go back to what you were saying of like, to me, what you were saying, like it can be so overwhelming and you want to fix things. I definitely feel like I really connect to like Bayo Kumalafe and what he said before about like work being social justice work being a field.
Mm.
That it's not a thing that you complete. It's like something you work. Like there's not like something you complete and do.
Mhm.
It's something you are participating in. But also, uh, I keep coming back to co-liberation
Mm.
instead of like this hero with the cape or like saviorism being the thing as our default. Like say
Yeah.
because right we're witnessing the thing. We feel really terrible about it. We want to stop it. We want to save it. We want to
Sure.
yes, do the thing that you can do, but like also take yourself out of the stance of saviorism and be
Mhm.
like, we as a collective need to be in a mindset of co-liberation. It will take all of us doing the thing that we do and being like our doing the thing, whatever it is that you feel you're here to do, and showing up as that. And so
Yeah.
it's not like up to just one person ever. That in and of itself is a relief.
Yeah.
Like, but there's still like, showing up in whatever capacity that you can, that you're able to. But as far as like burnout, yeah, I mean, I've worked as an elderly caregiver before, and I've had full experience with burnout. That does happen. Where you're just like, oh, I'm so tired, and just like you're just so, like the feeling is like spider webs that have dust on them that
Mm.
are just broken down. Like that's inside what you feel like when you become
Mm.
burnout. You're like, I just feel like nothing is there.
Mm.
Like, you know, um, so having a practice of like re-nourishing yourself, sometimes it's just sleep.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's going for a walk and just being with, feeling the love that's coming through the trees and seeing, um, like just seeing the sunlight on the tree, like the leaves for
Yeah.
me does that. Being with my dog, petting my friend, and
Yeah.
just being with her and having her look at me and sensing her love that she has for me and vice versa, repairs and nourishes me. But I could get burnout. And when I do, I just need to like have quiet time to myself,
Yeah.
napping, reading, tea, a little bit of like music sometimes in the background, but having space and time to do that. And because we are in the death throes of capitalism, I just want to acknowledge that there is a level and degree of privilege in my saying that. Even some people fucking, they don't have that. Like,
Yeah.
oh, that would be nice. Like, that sounds nice.
Yeah.
They don't have that.
Sure.
And so I also feel a responsibility to uh, co-create, to be aware of that, and to work towards the kind of reality where rest and that inner repair is part of the fabric of like how we show up for each other as a culture.
Mhm.
And that this
Absolutely.
whole thing that is valuing like what you can create and produce is like on its way out,
Mhm. Mhm.
really.
Really appreciate you emphasizing the need to slow down and come back to basics. Um, let the body fully reset and sleep deeply and find fresh air and co-regulation with pets or people and take in nature as sustenance. And I also really appreciate you acknowledging that that can be a privilege that's not always accessible. And I think for people who are working insane hours, providing care to people who need it, children, elderly, whomever, um, these people probably struggle to carve time for basic rest, let alone a creative practice. And I wonder for those people who are just really on the front lines right now, if they have the privilege of being able to even catch this episode, any words of wisdom, if there's one quick resource that you would recommend them reaching for, what would you encourage?
I don't even know, Dani. I watched a doctor come back from in the UK, I think, come back from Gaza, and just witnessing this. He just describes it as a tsunami of people dying that was just ongoing, happening in Palestine. And when you're saying people who are on the front lines, I think of people like that,
Yeah.
Or aid workers in Sudan or Burkina Faso, or these different places in the world where the inequality is so visceral we cannot understand and perceive.
Yeah.
It is outside of the sphere of our perception of what these challenges are happening. And all I can do is bear witness to it and send prayer, send aid, do what I can, go to protest, go to vigils. But as far as having some sort of answer of what, I am witnessing this right now, and I am in incredible grief of witnessing things happening in the world. I will say, though, what I'm noticing is that with the response, because we're seeing this for the first time, the images come like seeing it, people didn't see what Belgium was doing to the Congo back in the day. They didn't see the result of rubber quotas not being met. They never saw that. We're seeing this for the first time. And so it's creating this visceral anger, grief, astonishment, overwhelmment, whatever. But I feel, Dani, I also feel like it goes back to the collective we're being initiated from our collective, coming out of childhood into adulthood, crossing a threshold as a collective, saying, this will no longer happen. This will no longer happen. We cannot continue to do this, to exploit each other, to wreck someone else's ecology, to extract in such a way, and to be on our end basically participating in kind of like the company store, except the company store is like a set of brands, right? And the conditioning is so, because we're just now seeing this. I feel like we're just now seeing this. It was papers when our parents were younger. It was just like some photos on the front page, maybe, of a specific kind of newspaper, but not like constant feed, if you're aware to that. And so an initiation process in a community, at least in an Indigenous context, can be pretty intense. And into adulthood, and that intensity of recognizing this is what's happening, this is what is in the process of coming to the surface so that it can be released, so it can be relinquished and let go, is a visceral experience.
It is.
For those it's happening to and those that are witnessing it. So
it is.
I don't really have any answer.
I think that being with that visceral experience is really crucial. Like you're saying, allowing the grief to really rumble and to be honest with the catharsis as it's arising. To just have a raw human experience and let the body move and discharge that emotion feels like how we're going to build resilience. I was just talking with a friend about, these winds were whipping through the garden, and the sunflower, young flowers were bending, and some of them were breaking. And then the next day they are bending again toward the light and rising stronger. And because of that wind, their stalks are becoming more fibrous. And I would like to think that in the face of the horrors and the transparency of the media that is now flooding through the collective, that if we allow ourselves to turn toward and to feel the whiplash of that wind as it barrels through, that we can then come back honestly again toward the light, more sturdy, more available, not in a state of collapse, but in a state of resilience.
Well, yes, but there's a but for me that comes up when I'm hearing this about collapse, not collapse. I feel like things are in collapse, but it's the old way of being. it's like when they say, oh, the world is ending, and people say, no, it's not ending. I'm like, well, it is in a way. An old type of world is ending. This sense that you can do this to people.
Right.
It's like ending.
Yes.
Let's celebrate that death.
Mm-hmm.
Let's celebrate that death.
Absolutely.
And some of us, I've said this several times, like some of us are called to be death doulas.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us are called to be like, nope, this will no longer happen.
Yeah.
This is not okay. And it's sundown time. It's here. This is the grave for that.
Yeah.
To say no more.
Yes.
And then some people will be the midwives to help foster in the type of culture, community, accountability, healing, justice, co-liberation that is necessary for a time of healing, basically.
Yeah.
And humbleness to hold it.
Yeah, beautifully said. When
some will be bridge builders between it. Go ahead.
When I speak to collapse, I mean more on a personal, like nervous system level, in the face of the overwhelm, to feel defeated, to feel resigned, as opposed to that resiliency that would rise to whatever that calling might be, whether it's being with the death and the active dismantling, the active collapse, the celebration of the much needed collapse and shifting of these structures, whatever that is. I guess I just wanted to highlight what you were saying. It feels so potent to me that we don't have a framework yet for how to metabolize this new onslaught through the media. And it feels like part of what we need is to have real raw human catharsis around it as part of like building our capacity for resilience.
Yeah. Well, I think that with the work that I've been researching and engaged in, catharsis is definitely in there in terms of, because basically what I want to do is to have a membership-based space that's very large, a large space that has different areas. Think of like basically like a mall. If you gutted an entire mall and said, all right, this is not going to be about consumerism anymore.
Okay.
This is going to be about relationships and connection and about curation of culture, and to put in it those things that build community, that build belonging, that build connection, that build trust, and also have in it catharsis, ecstasis, the diversification of the way that we show up as energy, meaning like, and releases the energy of people in a way that's generative. And some people may show up as chefs, some may show up as potters, some may show up as caregivers, some may show up as Reiki professionals. I mean, whatever it is, I really see this like this co-weaving thing happening, basically like weaving. So if every single one of these reads as a person, right? And they show up in the energy which they are inspired to do, the way that they circulate their time, and their energy is aligned with, you fill in the blank, joy, potency, that like everyone is showing up and supporting the community, but also the community is supporting them and whatever it is that they are called to do, to show up as. But that this is a different expression of time, not time as money, time as a sentient medium to know, perceive, and express the joy of being. And that no one can fall through that weave. There's no gaps in that when there's that degree of dynamicism around the creating mutuality and care and expression, that if it's about making sure everyone has their cup full and advocating for the kind of world we want to be a part of, and advocate and be about and embody synchronicity, like to synchronize with people that are, you want to do the same kinds of things with regards to this, whatever it is, like that it's not whatever, but like in a way that is in service to the community, in a way that is nourishing to the community, and also is embodying the kind of energy you want to be about.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you're bringing forward, the themes of community and also shifting away from hyper individualism and into like personal alignment, that when we're truly showing up with following our calling, following our inspiration, harnessing our gifts, then we're showing up to community in an authentic and resourced way. And if everyone had the opportunity to do that, I love this image of the weave that happens, and that we're holding one another really tightly woven and intimately in that kind of shared space. I mean, it feels, of course, it's idealistic. Like I think so many people want that, and so many people yearn for it and are starved for it. And so much of their time and energy is currently siphoned toward whatever 9 to 5 task or role they've been dubbed with. But
Sure.
but what do you feel are ways that we could experiment a little bit, like within the confines of the current infrastructure? What are some playful ways that we could start to scratch the surface of, like, what are my gifts? Like, what is my calling? How would I show up to potentially play and experiment in that kind of collaborative space?
Yeah. I think radical surrendering to enthusiasm, and I
Mm,
don't say that lightly. Enthusiasm is entheos,
mm,
entheos in God,
mm.
in the state of the sacred enthusiasm. Like even in Christian doctrine, it says be like little children, right?
Yeah.
But that state of being like excited to be alive is an inheriting. You're inheriting the gift of breath,
Mm,
the gift of the present moment. You're inheriting it
mm.
when you're in enthusiasm, in that potency and that liveness of whatever it is that you're inspired to do. I would say though, like scratching the surface is to diversify the way that you show up and exchange with people, to be able to tamper with the current systems that exist and go beyond them to create sufficiency in your own life as an individual and within your community, is to diversify equity flows. So what I mean by that is like, so I see money as being generally kind of neutral. I'm not talking about the interest bearing debt and the money people. I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying money in general, it is neutral energy and you can imbue it with whatever you want. So you can circulate it with healing justice. You can circulate it with the co-creation of sufficiency for all peoples, right? It's neutral energy. You can imbue it with whatever you want. But I also think that it's like a monocrop, that it's like corn, right? It's like corn or something. But there is barter. There is time banking.
Mhm.
There is like trade, skill for this. I'll trade you
Yeah.
a loaf of sourdough to
Yeah.
like go do that. Forms of barter, I think, is tampering with the known equity flows and started scratching the surface into that community collective, making sure orchestrating that you're I mean, sorry, I get excited. Making sure you're orchestrating like this experience of sufficiency on an individual and a collective level, and in a way that is tapping into synchronicity. I will say, like, one time I was really, really potent about like whatever I was enthusiastic about, I was just going to do. I was just like, I'm going to do this. I don't care what it whatever I feel really inspired to go do, I'm just going to do it and like surrender to that. And this one day, this is when I was living in Ventura. This was years ago. I was like, okay, I'm going to have my day, but I'm going to like just say yes to this impulse, whatever it is. And I was in this store downtown. I think it was like a novelty sort of costume store. It's not there anymore. It's like a Buffalo Exchange now. But it used to be some sort of costume store. I don't remember the name. I'm in it. This man walks in holding roses, and he's got like this, and he was selling flowers, like, and it was almost as if like he was glowing. Like I was so excited to get a flower or flowers from him, and I didn't know why, because I didn't want the flowers. I'm like, why do I want flowers right now? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It was just really, I was like, all right, I really want this thing, and this is what is inspiring me to do right now. So I'm just gonna like do this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I at first I was doing an inner battle with myself, like, oh, come on, we don't need it. It's probably like $10 or $20. We don't need to do that right now. But still there was this thing like, go buy flowers. I'm like, oh, okay. So I go outside the shop, I stop what I'm doing, and he's like already across the street and then down at like Dargan's or something, like
Okay.
down on the corner. You know where this is, I'm sure. and he was already making his way down there. So I kind of like had to chase him down.
Uh-huh.
I go into Dargan's. I get like, he had like a rose or something, a single rose for like, or 3 roses or something for like $10 or 15 or something. So I buy this. I'm like, okay, I got these flowers now. Walking out of Dargan's. And this homeless woman was picking up a rose off the ground, like right as I was walking out. And it was made from a palm frond.
Yeah.
And it was like a paper, like, yeah. And she was scooping it up. And I had this sense of electricity in me. And I wanted to give her the bouquet. And I said, these must be for you. And her face just lit up and she was like crying. She was like, I don't come downtown anymore because people are mean. And I could just feel that like this thing that I was inspired to do, like shifted something for her. Yeah. And like, I'll never forget that, like living in inspiration that way. Yeah. And it still is exciting to me of like, what would it be like to participate in a kind of culture that's about that? Yeah. About following inspiration, but also like following it from an open-hearted space that's not just about like, oh, getting your painting on a wall, but it's like responsive to inequity, in a way that is again, it comes back to the co-liberation thing. Like it's not a top-down thing. It's this thing where we're all going to have to be like coming at it underneath, restructuring power flows from the bottom up kind of thing. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
My body went electric. This story, such a powerful illustration. I think it's really easy with all of our conditioning to fall under the spell that like, art is relegated to the few gifted, talented ones, or, like play and all of that is for people who aren't taking their lives seriously, but I have real work to do and real responsibilities. And all of those voices that have been implanted in us, it takes a dedication and determination to say, my enthusiasm matters and I'm going to follow it. And I love this practice that you're introducing, like just for today, I'm going to follow this thing and see where it goes, to give yourself a bit of room to try that on. What strikes me in the story is the resistance that showed up along the way, like, I don't really need to spend that kind of money. Like, I'm in the middle of this thing and now I'm going to chase this guy around the corner and down the way. Yeah. Like, it's not logical. It doesn't, there's some blocks and there's some hurdles, and yet you're following it for it to come around full circle in the most powerful, meaningful way for this woman. And how beautiful that you had the kind of full circuit story in a quick vignette. But I think if we're talking about the long arc of our lives or the long arc of human history, we might be giving ourselves to a creative process that's incubating for decades. That might be our version of going down the stairwell. And we may never know in our lifetime that bouquet is being handed over to someone who's going to receive it. Like we may never feel or witness the deliverance of that dedication, that devotional practice. That's exciting to me. That's really exciting to me. This idea that the story that's being woven is so much deeper, so much broader.
Yeah. One of my favorite movies is, sometimes I watch movies when I need to decompress.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite movies is Benjamin Button, what's it called?
I never saw that.
Oh, you got to see it.
Okay.
There's this cool part where like there's an orchestration of events, a sequence of events that happens that lead to a major thing happening. And I loved the way that it was crafted and told, that if any one of those things were to shift, this thing might not have happened.
Right.
And I feel like what you're describing is like the nature of this like divine lattice work, like this weaving, this tapestry, that creation is the sacred, is telling with our lives, Dani. And like, the kindness, the potency of like a kind act having a ripple effect that we may never know, but because we are connected, like, yeah, I love that.
I love that too. I love the way life weaves us, and I just, this is the kind of smallness that I really savor. You know, there's the overwhelm smallness, there's the hopelessness small, but this kind of smallness is the kind that keeps me reaching back in to roll up my sleeves and experiment a little more and feel a little deeper and show up again and lean in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I had a question for you, but it's kind of slippery. Did you have a place you wanted to go? Oh, did you have something?
Oh, I was thinking about something else actually. It was popping in my mind about like not about the lattice of kindness, but about creativity and not really knowing what its trajectory will be. And I think about Hayao Miyazaki, right? I think about this man, and I think about the trajectory of his creativity.
Yeah.
That I really do believe that like someone will figure out a way to print like contour crafting. You know how they can build houses with 3D printing?
Okay.
Right? I feel like someone's going to 3D print one of his cities
or
then something.
I'll go live there.
Right. Or that someone can design a whole neighborhood like based on some of his vision, and like he would like I get excited thinking about like the trajectory that he will have or is having in the psyche and the collective psyche and the yearning for like
Mythos.
These experiences.
Yeah.
And what that will maybe end up as, or how that will, I could really see like whole cities really being like entire art installations. Like I could see it crystal clear.
Yeah.
Like just entire sittings. If you don't have to be tied to a debt, hemmed into a desk, if you're set free with how you can experience your time and how you can weave your time with others in a way that's empowering, right? Mm-hmm. Can you imagine, like, yeah, it's just that. And I don't want to fetishize that. I want to see it as like a coin, because this is the side of coin that I'm talking about. Is full empowerment and like complete realization, self-realization, to have that as a culture. But like on the opposite side, we have to create sufficiency first.
Sure.
For that to be a thing. I'm just saying it's like something I am also excited about, and also looking forward not to be in mourning all the time for like the inverse of that we're witnessing now.
Yeah. Yeah. On this theme of like, we may never know the reach of our creative pursuits. We may never know our part in the greater weaving of things. I think a lot about how our true nature is actually very porous. You know, we're sort of sold the density fantasy, the density trip. Like you were saying, the very linear protocol of our lives. You go to school, you do this, and then you get that, and that everything is very predictable, transactional, and yet, like your story, you know, we all have these glimpses into these synchronicities and these magical orchestrations, that there's something so much deeper moving through and moving all of us into our lives. And I feel like dreams are such a powerful channel for that guidance and insight to inform us. And I wonder if there are any dreams that have really impacted you in the way that you've shifted the way you've looked at life or your own personal life, or affected the way that you've chosen to move through the world.
Mm-hmm. There's quite a few that I've had, but like I would say there's probably like 5 or so. There's 5 to 7, I'm not sure, something like that, of like dreams that have really, really impacted me. And it's hard to say which one. This one, I was like in, this was when I was working for, I told you I've been doing odd jobs for like forever recently. I was working for a company that did boots, like they did vintage boots and leather, and we would like prepare it and then clean it up and then post it online. It was like vintage online sales or whatever. And I was living in Ojai at the time. This would have been maybe the year before I met you, or around the time that we met, something like that. And so I started doing this work of like, online sales or whatever. And in the dream, I took a nap in the afternoon. It was the spring of 2012. I took a nap in the afternoon and I woke up and I was back at work. And the manager said, "There's somebody in your office to see you." And I was like, "Oh," which it wasn't my office. It was just like the room that we would work in. And it was kind of dark, but there was a figure of somebody there. And it was this older woman. And I don't know, I didn't really see her very well. She came out and then she was holding something. And she opened her coat and she said, "This is you." And it was kind of like some kind of baby. It was like a baby. And I kind of couldn't see it. It was weird. It was like moving and it was spherical and it had a lot of eyes and it was smiling with all of its eyes. And it had a sense of preciousness towards it, but it was weird. It was like moving. So I couldn't quite see what was happening. It was like vibrating or something. It's very interesting. And I felt a sense of profound love for this creature thing, whatever it was. And I was like, gave it back to her. And she said, "You're the caller. You're here you have to make the call, but you have to do it loudly to wake up all the animals because some of the small ones will want to hurt you." And I was like, okay, okay. And it was pretty intense. I was like, she was saying this as if it was really, really important for me to do. "You're the caller, you have to make the call." So I was like, okay.
Can you say the phrase again, just one more time?
She said, "You're the caller, you're here to make the call, like to issue a call. Like the wolves do." That's what she said, like the wolves do. And you have to wake up all the animals because the smaller ones will want to hurt you, but the larger ones will protect you, basically. I was like, okay, but I felt like a sense of like, I was nervous because like she had imbued such importance on it. And she was this beautiful crone figure, hair to waist, silver gray. I don't know. There's something about her. Anyways, so I try to get out of that job. And there's boxes. And I'm trying to maneuver through the boxes, like through the shipping, because this was like a shipping job. But for whatever reason, it felt like it took me forever to get around work, which that means some things to me. But like I think that my sense of worth being tied to labor and that what I could produce, and I'm only as good as what I could produce and bring to the table kind of thing. I get out of the office where I'm working and I come to a walkway and there's people walking around. It's odd that there's no cars. There's just like these little roads that are maybe like 8 feet wide and they're full of people walking around. And there's a city all of a sudden. It's not Ojai anymore. It's like a city, like in a city in the dream world. High rises kind of, but I've never been to the city. And I noticed that the people are trying to get around each other. They're sort of like impatient, like I need to like be somewhere. They're a little bit like, it's kind of crowded. And I look down and some of the people had mortal wounds, like a gunshot or some. Yeah. So I realized they weren't alive. It was some sort of Bardo place kind of vibe. I don't know what it was, but I realized like what was happening and I got scared. And sometimes when I get scared in dream time, I like go to sleep. I like get like stiff like a statue and I like.
Interesting. Huh.
And I go to sleep to like protect myself or something. And I woke up and time had passed, like literal.
Still in
like
the dream.
I was still, in the dream.
Okay.
And I was still on the street right where I had like frozen up and like gotten too scared.
Okay.
And, like went like I don't know how to describe it. It's like going into some sort of sleep mode because I got overwhelmed. But I didn't experience any time passing. But when I came back to, I could see time had traversed. And there was hardly any people around. It was just sparse. There was nobody really around. And the time of day looked a little different. It looked like a couple hours had passed. And I walked forward a little bit and I was like, okay, got to make the call. Got to make the call. All right, I'm going to do this thing. All right. And I take a big breath and I go, nothing comes out. And I get so scared. And I'm like, where did my voice go? Where is it? Like, why can't I make sound? And all of a sudden, these huge creatures that look like they were the size of lions or they were like the size of lions, but they were more like not nice, like a hyena. And they were made of branches like branches, like curly willow, not curly willow, like grapevine branches, kind of like grapevine branches, but they're old. But there's no leaves on them. They're like spindly. I don't know how to describe them, except that they look like they were made of branches, and they look like they were going to tear the shit out of me. They were just coming towards me, and I was so scared.
Damn.
And they had blue lights. I noticed they had blue light for their eyes. And there was something about that, like, I don't know, there was something weird about that. Anyways, so they didn't look like normal animals, but they were like coming towards me. And I'm petrified. They're like coming towards me like they're going to tear me apart. And this woman out of nowhere, I felt like she was Indigenous. That was the vibe that I got from her, that she was a fellow Indigenous woman. She grabs my hand and she said, no, like the wolves do. And when she grabbed my hand, she like sent me what that meant. And I was like, oh, and I wasn't afraid anymore.
Wow.
Like there's a party in your heart that you cannot contain.
Oh.
Like there's a party in your heart that you cannot contain. And so she grabs my hand and I'm like, oh, I wasn't afraid anymore. And I was like, oh, these animals. Like I was like, it was just a split second of thought that it just conferred that I didn't have any reason to be afraid of these little animals. And like everything was all good. And I just needed to like harness that joy from my heart.
Amazing.
And yeah. And so I just went, woo! But it was much louder and longer than that. It was like the loudest, like woohoo or whatever. Like, yeah, like there's a party that's happening and the party is heaven and the heaven is happening inside of us. That heaven as a practice, heaven as a perspective. That was the vibe.
Heaven as a howl.
Heaven as a howl, like heaven as like joy, fullness, embodied kind of thing. And I went, woohoo. And the animals were gone. Those things, whatever they were gone. And even more time had traversed when I stopped. So it was as if like several hours had passed during my woohoo, like the call that I made. I wasn't aware of how much time had passed when I made it. It was several hours long.
Wow.
Was the vibe that I understood. And when I stopped, I looked and the windows were stopping their vibration. There was like a city that I was in and there were like these brick buildings and the windows stopped vibrating. And it was from me because my call or whatever was so loud. It like stopped vibrating the windows. And then all of a sudden I heard a in the distance. And it was huge. It was from some animal in the spirit realm. I don't know. It was some huge animal that was like call and response. Like, I hear you.
Wow.
I don't know what that was about, but like,
incredible.
I don't know what animal.
It's amazing that the lion hyenas are so huge, right? Like to human proportions, but then in the dream space, they ended up being the small animals.
They were the small ones. Yeah. But the big one, I never saw it, but I had the sense that it was Jurassic. I had the sense that it was really big, like 60 feet tall or something. Wow. That was the vibe that I got from how big it was. And the windows really, really shook them. I thought they were going to break when I looked up.
That's amazing.
And then something shifted where I could see from the corner of my eye, the road I was on, there was like a tunnel that it went into in the distance that had always been there. It was just in the distance. And I saw were like, let me back up. My perception of what an angel looks like is inspired by a film called Wings of Desire. So the angels in Wings of Desire all wear trench coats. So sometimes something will show up in a dream time like a character, but their embodiment, they're physically embodying a perception that I have about something.
Gotcha.
So to me, when I saw them, I thought those are angels. Those are angels. Those are what those look like. Those are angels. Yeah. And they were going into the tunnel and lights started coming on in the tunnel. And the vibe that I had got was that I had somehow called the cavalry,
Wow.
Of some kind, that they were like, all right, engines on, it's go time.
Wow.
Something about that was like, okay, it's go time.
Amazing.
And I had no idea what it was about. And all of a sudden, the next thing I saw was this seal that was made of copper, pounded copper. And it was 12 feet wide and it had petals. This was all in metal, but it had petals like lotus petals all on the rim on the outside it was like a seal. My brain keeps saying it was a seal. It was huge, and it had 4 lines written in the seal that were big letters, like letters this tall, but that were illuminated. So they were lit up from the back, and they were ancient. I couldn't read them. They said they were in Sanskrit or something.
Wow.
And it was as if I was looking at the story of my life in 4 sentences. And I stepped from the first sentence to the second sentence, as if I had done something very important that I was supposed to do in dream time, in the spirit world or something. And that was something. I don't know what it said. I don't know what it said, but I woke up with this feeling of like, oh, I'm on a mission, or like I'm doing something. There's something that I am doing that was not insignificant that just happened.
Yeah.
And it just really shook in a good way, but it like really, I mean, I'm like shaking.
Yeah.
Whenever I feel this way. But yeah, I just feel, there was something about that. And I don't know what it was about.
Incredibly
but
fortifying this dream. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
to go to make the call and to feel that loss of voice, but then to join hands and to be fortified, know like the wolves do, and then to feel everything that
Mm-hmm.
comes through you and everything that comes after, powerfully activating. I mean,
Yeah.
do you just tap into that dream when you like feel shaky or unsteady? How does that dream inform the way you now move through your life?
I don't think about it that much, honestly. I don't give it a lot of thought. I think it's just like, okay, we're on a journey. We're on a journey and it matters. And I don't know. I don't think about that dream a lot. It's definitely one of the ones though that made me realize like, oh, that was not just a dream. That was not just like when people say, oh, it's just a dream.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've been in dream time before where, just briefly, I've been in dream time before where I was sitting on a couch and there was a teenage boy there. There were others that were there too, and they were playing or watching TV. And I was like, oh, dude, we're dreaming right now. And the guy turned to me and said, I'm not dreaming, I'm asleep. And I was like, oh, so some people don't actually dream. But he was like, I'm not here. Like, I'm just asleep. Like,
That's
it's
so
fine.
funny.
But it was interesting. Like, thanks for listening and holding space for me to safely talk about that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I feel like there's so much to explore. We could have easily another 2-hour discussion just on the theme of dreams and dream realms and the importance of tending to those other aspects of our lives and of reality. Mm-hmm. So so maybe you don't think about this particular dream as like a resource for fortification toward your waking life, but it sounds like this dream opened your aperture. In
Yeah. It made me aware of that there's work that I'm get engaged in. That's the vibe that I get, that there's work that I'm engaged in that's not just here, but there's work that I'm also doing like in dream time, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting thing to live in modernity, and I appreciate that you naming this while the dream also had this vignette of your worth being tied to your productivity. I think
Yeah.
it's a funny thing to have so much emphasis on things that can be quantified and accolades for accomplishments or whatever kind of trajectories we think we're on in the visible tangible reality. And I imagine a lot of people listening really relate to what you're describing, which is not just having an active dream life or having vivid dreams, but having missions and quests and like deep,
Yeah.
profound experiences. And those deep dreamers and the artists and the activists, the intuitives, I think, I mean, I don't want to make a generalization, but I think it's probably safe to say that many of us struggle to find our way in a world and in systems that aren't designed to foster these gifts. And I wonder what you might say to encourage those of us to value those gifts, inside of a culture that would say otherwise.
Yeah. I think that's one of my biggest struggles, actually. I don't know that I can answer that and be like, oh, I know the answer to that or anything. I'm like, that's definitely been a huge thing for me to like try to recognize the gift and keep, because the whole of the culture is saying, be a lawyer.
Right. Yeah.
Or whatever, be a doctor or something.
Totally.
I'm not to say there's something wrong with being a lawyer or a doctor. I'm just saying,
Sure.
like, it's saying make the most money possible. I was actually listening to a podcast recently that was, what was it called? The Emerald something. I can't remember the name.
I love the Emerald.
But he's basically talking about the culture that has shut down the voice of its intuitives or even mystics. Like it's sort of doomed. Like we need to have people who are connected to the unseen in a way.
Yeah.
Because it's so, I will say, scientific reductionism or materialism as a mindset is like the governing paradigm. And it makes me most angry when it comes to education. And the interest that I have in a healthy culture, I think must be somehow integrated with holistic education, which is to say education that is not based in tabula rasa. Tabula rasa meaning blank slate. It assumes that children don't know anything until like a receptacle information is like shoved into them through repetition, and that then they are validated and said to be intelligence in this way. And actually, like Sir Ken Robinson, his whole work is when he talks at his lectures, when he talks about like the problem with creativity in schools is that it shuts it down.
Yeah.
That actually we can test at genius levels at 6 years old, and by the time we're 16, that all gets shut down to this size through repetition. But going back to what you're saying about like how do you have encouragement for people who are creative or intuitive or even have things that they can't describe? Like I've had things happen that I cannot describe why this is happening or how this happened. Like going through some major energetic shifts when I was 30 and I could swear that I could hear whales, but we were miles away from the beach. And I didn't have the sense to like not go outside at 3 a.m. when it's cold without shoes on, because I was trying to hear the whales better. Like not all there, right? All there according to society's standards of what is a normal person behaving the way a normal person should behave. I was having an experience I can't describe or explain. And then the next morning, all these whales had like beached themselves right at the beach, but we were miles away. We weren't like, I couldn't have heard them, but somehow I could hear them. Wow. But stuff like that, I can't describe. Yeah. Some people would say, oh, that's just a coincidence. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you, man. I don't hear whales all the time. I don't know what to tell you. Like,
it's incredible.
But there are things.
And it's so valuable. So valuable.
Yeah.
I mean, why is it valuable, Amber? Why is it valuable to you personally in your life?
Makes me feel connected to a reality that I know is not validated. So to me, the whales are significant. I'll just touch on one other short dream, but basically, like I had been in this rushing wave of water was coming in, and people were panicking, and they were trying to get inside of this storefront or something. But when you get inside, it was like a mansion, but the mansion was like 1980s lawyer or something. I don't know how to describe it. It was like not fancy, and it used to be fancy at one time, I'm sure, but to me, it just kind of didn't click. It was like, oh, who would want this kind of thing? And there was no one there. It all was just stagnant. The air was stagnant. And it was like, yeah. And I was trying to get out of it because there was something unnatural about the air in there. There was no life in that building. There was wealth, but there was not a sense of aliveness. It was stagnancy. And it represented, I think, the stagnancy of wealth. So I was like, I got to get out of here. I find a window in the attic and I leap out, because what I see is that this wave that came down, the water had risen, but it was placid now. And people were just swimming and having a party outside with whales. Love it. They were just swimming with whales, having a party outside. And I dove out into it and woke up. But the perception of like, this thing is coming. It's the end of the world kind of thing. And that was not the case. And that's to me what the whales kind of represent. They're like I see them as star cousins kind of thing. That might sound a little woo to some people, but I don't think they're just animals. I have a lot of ideas about. Yeah.
Me too.
But yeah,
I've had a lot of powerful,
they are beautiful
whale dreams as well, and they often come as guides and ushering toward the next way of living. So your dream is a happy cousin to some of my whale dreams too. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
We've descended into the deep. It's been a rich arc. Thank you so much for your time and your heart and your inspiration and all of your invitations and suggestions as to how people can engage and try these lenses on in their lives.
Sure. Yeah. And to get into touch with whatever medicine is sleeping within themselves that's yet to be rendered or acknowledged.
Yeah. Beautifully said. Thank you, Amber.
Thank you, Dani. I love you.
I love you too so much.
Haku Magatuka Amber be Pagaling Alapalo Khalapunis Hamala Chumash Ino. Hi, I'm Amber B. Pagaling, and I'm from Santa Ynez, California, and I'm Chumash Indigenous. And you can find out more about my work at regenerativefootprint.org. I just want to say thank you for listening, and I realize how precious our attention is, and that I'd like to use this time instead of promotional purposes to direct you to your own heart with gratitude and with synchronicity for the field that you are in and for those that you're connecting with. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to The Dreaming Wild. Do you have a magical tale or episode idea? Go to thedreamingwild.com to leave a voicemail, get featured on the show, and join our patron community meetups. We've got an alchemical cauldron of inspiration brewing. You should definitely come check it out. Thank you so much for listening, sharing, and subscribing. It's your generosity that keeps the project alive. Sending so much love from my heart to yours. See you next time.